Good afternoon, this is Sean Golding with Golding & Golding. As we enter the thick of tax season, we get lots of questions about the different offshore disclosure programs, how to get penalty relief, what they can do to get into compliance, timing issues. The 15th is approaching. What do you do? Let's talk through it. So there's a lot of bad information online. There's a lot of fear-mongering. There's a lot of scaremongering. There's a lot of insecurity that is formed when attorneys and other tax professionals who are not experienced kind of pressure taxpayers into doing things that they wouldn't ordinarily do. So let's kind of walk through the different options and a few things to keep in mind before we start. One, you can typically apply for an extension. So if the 15th is coming and you're not ready, you may want to consider applying for an extension, Form 4868. There's some other ways to do it. 7004 for certain other forms. You want to make sure you pay any estimated taxes due by the 15th. You don't get an extension for the amount due. Another thing to keep in mind, especially for the newer expats, if you're living overseas, you typically get an automatic extension till June, but you may want to apply for an extension until October as well. So the IRS requires taxpayers who have foreign accounts, assets, investments, and income when they meet certain threshold requirements to file different forms. And it's really not fair because it's not like you come to the United States as a permanent resident, let's say, or you're a citizen investing overseas and you get this book and this book tells you everything you need to do and you just need to read it, right? It's kind of like every man, every woman, everyone for themselves. So there are many different types of international forms someone has to file: the FBAR, Form 8938, 5471, 3520, etc., etc. If you don't file it, you could be penalized, and some of those penalties can be significant. Willful FBAR, 50%, although willful FBAR is pretty rare. You might see a lot of case law about it because the cases involving willful tend to make it to the news, or at least the tax news, but most violations are non-willful. But then there's things like 3520 foreign gift where you can get a 25% penalty on the value of the gift and things like that. And so if you are out of compliance because you filed late, incomplete, or you haven't filed the forms, there are various amnesty programs, relief programs, penalty abatement programs that you can use to get into compliance. The key thing to determine is whether you're willful or non-willful. The majority of the time people are non-willful, but some people are willful, and that's okay too, because there's a program you can use to get into compliance. Let's talk through the more common ways to do this. So the Streamlined Filing Compliance Procedures, SFCP, you'll see it all over the World Wide Web. It is for non-willful taxpayers. And these first few that we're going to go through is non-willful, okay? And as a side note, non-willful, there is no bright line test. It's a totality of the circumstance, smell test. You just look at the facts, you look at the circumstances, you speak with a board certified specialist or two or three and kind of evaluate the situation, but there's no absolute test that you use, okay? Assuming you're non-willful, streamlined filing compliance procedures is typically the way to go, okay? The main requirements for eligibility, whether it's domestic or foreign, and again, that only refers to the residence of the taxpayer, not the location of the assets, is that you are non-willful and that you are not currently under audit. Under the domestic version of the program, it presumes that you filed original tax returns timely prior. You do that program, there's a 5% penalty, but that's essentially the end of it. The penalty is on the aggregate value of unreported foreign accounts in the highest year within the past 6 years using the December 31st value. Why? Because people's accounts may be artificially high throughout the year. Maybe you sold a home, etc., etc. You transferred money overseas to buy a home. But at the end of the day, the IRS it's a fair program, okay? I mean, nobody wants to pay a penalty, right? But as far as the IRS goes, it's a pretty fair, it's a fairly fair program. And so what happens is you pay a 5% penalty. That's the end of it. You don't get a closing letter like you do for VDP, but it almost always closes out. That's the domestic version, okay? You had to have filed original returns and you're non-willful, okay? The foreign version of the program is for taxpayers who either lived outside of the U.S. for at least 330 days in any one of the past 3 years or didn't meet the substantial presence test. There are some nuances to that, but what's great about that is there is no penalty. That 5% penalty is waived. There's no penalty on the taxes, no penalty on the reporting, and you can file original returns. So if you have not filed tax returns in the past, you can file original returns through the program. They're pretty strict with the residence requirements, so that's something to keep in mind. But for people who qualify for Streamlined Foreign, that's typically the best way to go. There's also the delinquency procedures, delinquent FBAR, and delinquent international information return submission procedures. It's a lot to say. DFSP, just call it delinquent FBAR or delinquent procedures. Delinquent FBAR, under either one of these, the general idea is that there's no unreported income. You don't have to amend your returns to include income. What it is you didn't file forms. So the delinquent FBAR just means the FBAR is the only form you had to file. You didn't file it, you get to go back and file it, and there's no penalty. Delinquent procedures means there's other forms beyond the FBAR, maybe 3520, 8938, etc., but they don't guarantee the penalty waiver like they did back in the day. Before November 2020, they both operated the same from a penalty waiver standpoint. Now, after November 2020, I believe, is the key date, the IRS can still penalize you. Why? Presumably it's because they wanted to run around penalizing all these people for 3520. Okay. There are other alternatives as well. If a taxpayer can show they had reasonable cause and not willful neglect, or meet other reasonable cause standards, then they may be able to submit that proactively to avoid a penalty being issued or use it defensively to abate the penalty. That's something to keep in mind as well, but there's no specific form. I mean, a lot of times you'll submit an 843, but there's no specific reasonable cause form per se, like there is the non-willful certification for Streamline, let's say. Voluntary Disclosure Program, VDP, is a different beast, especially the newer version of the program. It's for willful taxpayers. You have to affirm under penalty of perjury that you're willful. It doesn't mean you're criminal per se, but you're not non-willful, okay? Back in the day, they had an offshoot of the traditional VDP, which was OVDP. Many clients came to us and wanted to go through OVDP, even if they were non-willful, because the penalty was bearable and you got a closing letter, which people liked. The new VDP program, it's a 50% penalty almost all the time, or the minimum, which is $100,000, but it adjusts for inflation. There's also a penalty on the highest year's tax liability. You have to do an audit. Back in the day, there were never audits. So there's more to it. But if you're willful, it's essentially the only option you have. You can't do the delinquency procedures or Streamline. You can't do QARs. You can't do reasonable cause. It's basically where you're at if you're going to do anything. Which leads me to the next thing, which is quiet disclosure. Some taxpayers consider doing a quiet disclosure. I find here, from the thousands of taxpayers that we've worked with over 80, 90 different countries, is that most taxpayers wouldn't do a quiet disclosure, except they're kind of goaded into it by the tax professional, either a CPA trying to compete with attorneys who don't know what they're doing, or the tax professional who did the original submission and doesn't want to, they started reading about what could happen and they got freaked out, understandably, but then they go, oh, let's just go back and submit. Don't worry about it. Nothing will happen. The IRS is understaffed. Members are underpaid. There's no time to get to you. But if they do, the IRS has made it known that they will go after you. Civil, it could even reach into criminal. Probably not most of the time, but a lot of taxpayers would qualify for delinquency procedures, delinquent FBAR, or even Streamlined Foreign, where there's almost guaranteed no penalty. So now to take the leap and do a quiet disclosure, you're really putting yourself in harm's way, and you're turning yourself willful when it might have been non-willful to begin with. We got a ton of free information on our website and our sub-websites about all the different amnesty programs. You can always reach out and schedule a reduced fee initial consultation if it's appropriate to your matter and it's something that we handle here. Again, my name is Sean Golding with Golding & Golding. Thank you for your time. Enjoy the rest of your day.